The SEC has a measly 2 losses on its non-conference slate thus far from Vanderbilt and Tennessee. They've won most of the big games, although there have been very few. We get another one Thursday night when Auburn travels out to Manhattan, Kansas to take on the Wildcats of Kansas State. We bring in Brittnee Taylor Newman of Football.com and Last Word on Sports to talk about the Auburn Tigers and the Wildcats of Kansas State. Hey, Brittney, let's talk about this Auburn offense. Nick Marshall at the controls, taking them to the BCS championship game last year, and your thoughts about what you've seen out of the Tigers through the first 2 games.
Yeah. Well, we all know that Nick Marshall's a fantastic quarterback. He's proven, obviously led Auburn to their rise to the BCS game last year. Nobody really had any doubts coming into this year about Nick Marshall, but he's been off to a little bit of a slow start in his passing game. Didn't play the first half of the Arkansas game, sat out for disciplinary reasons. There was a marijuana citation from the offseason. And only played a portion of the San Jose State game. So really, we've only seen him play in 5 quarters. Rushing this season, he's been on point as he always is. 103 yards so far for 11 carries, 1 touchdown. It's his passing game that is causing some fans to question where Nick Marshall's at. He's 14 of 25 attempts for the season, only 151 yards and 1 touchdown. But as I said earlier, we've really only seen him play in 5 quarters, so this may be the week where we finally see last year's Nick Marshall step up to the plate.
Definitely, and it's amazing with this Auburn rushing attack that #1 in the nation in rushing, and usually that's a distinction that goes to Navy or Army that plays a little bit inferior opponents and can't pass the football, but to do that in the SEC is incredible. And despite the loss of Trey Mason, it doesn't seem like they've missed a beat, so they lose 1,800 yards plus a great left tackle in the first round of the NFL draft, and they still are a tremendous rushing attack. Let's see, 358 against San Jose State, 302 against Arkansas. So, yeah, looking for Marshall to step in as a passer and kind of balance out the offense. We see that Sammie Coates is back, 9 touchdown receptions last year. He was really the explosive big play guy in this passing attack, but only 1 reception this year, missed the entire last game against San Jose State. So Kansas State, they present an interesting matchup here in that they're typically not a juggernaut when it comes to talent. They do more with less. They recruit a lot of JUCO guys. They bring in a lot of guys that are kind of underachievers early in their careers, and Bill Snyder coaches them up, and they do an outstanding job there. So you tell us a little bit about the Kansas State when you see they're starting on offense.
Well, I think there's 2 key players to look at for offense for Kansas State. One, obviously, is going to be quarterback Jake Lockers. Fantastic quarterback, just as strong with his legs as he is with his arm. He's got the record right now for career pass efficiency for Kansas State history. Obviously, a very, very mobile dual-threat quarterback, similar in the way that you see Nick Marshall is a dual-threat quarterback, although Kansas State's approach is a little bit different in that Bill Snyder actually designs plays that are meant strictly for Jake Waters to run. And earlier this week it was interesting, Gus Malzahn was speaking to that and actually referred to Jake Waters as another running back. He said it's just like preparing for another running back on the field as opposed to a quarterback. That's really how mobile he is and how often Bill Snyder uses him in quarterback run design plays.
And basically Gus Malzahn could take that a step further and basically say we basically face the same type quarterback every day in practice, so our defense should be used to it, so it shouldn't be a huge issue there. You mentioned Tyler Lockett. Your thoughts about him? He's a dynamic player, very polished wide receiver.
Yeah, absolutely. He was 11th in the country last year. He's a senior. I think he's the second one to watch in this game. I think he and Jake Waters will end up being the difference. He's already had a standout start for 2014, 7 receptions for a total of 145 yards, so that's 20.7 yards per carry. So he's already had an impact. Even in, as you said, their scare last week, in 2 games, he's already had an impact. So I'd look for him to definitely be moving the ball this evening. And if Auburn can defend him, that's where you're going to kind of probably start to see a problem. If they're double teaming Lockett, that's when you're going to see a problem for Kansas State, for sure.
Yeah, and for Auburn fans who are watching on Thursday night, of course, they won't want to miss that game. Tyler Lockett's not necessarily a freakish athlete that's going to wow you with his size or strength like a Dorial Green Beckham Jr. He's a very polished NFL-ready wide receiver, though. Caught 81 passes. I mostly caught him in the bowl game against Michigan. Caught 3 touchdown passes in that game and was basically not being able to be covered in that game. So we got Auburn, we got Kansas State, and like I mentioned off the top, for the SEC, there can be no knocks on this conference at this point. They've taken care of business outside of the conference, but aside from LSU, Wisconsin, Georgia, Clemson, really those are the only 2 that are outstanding games that provided some challenge. How do you see this one playing out, Auburn, Kansas State?
I think that Auburn is probably going to walk away with a W. It's interesting. You saw them play Arkansas at the beginning of the season, and then Arkansas stepped away. Auburn was able to dominate that game, and then Arkansas, kind of bottom-tier SEC, walked away and then was able to soundly defeat Texas Tech, another Big 12 opponent. So I think as much as people may want to get away from the argument this year that it's SEC versus every other conference, I think that we saw that in that game and some of the other matchups, and we're going to see that again in this game. Auburn, I think, is going to be able to overcome the noise. It's a sellout crowd in Manhattan. Certainly not anything probably as loud as Auburn is used to seeing when visiting other SEC stadiums. So I think eventually Auburn defense overcomes Lockett and Waters and is able to walk away with the W.
Yeah, unless you specifically root for Auburn or just root for the SEC across the board, regardless of who they're playing outside the conference. Kansas State's one of those programs you have to root for. They don't get the top kids. They get like top 40 recruiting classes, and they somehow compete with Oklahoma and Baylor and Oklahoma State, Texas and the Big 12, and somehow contend for championships, play in BCS bowl games. But usually when they come up against this type of talent, like they did against Oregon a couple years ago in the Fiesta Bowl, it gets a little bit ugly. So I would expect Kansas State, like you say, they're going to compete. They've got some playmakers. They're going to be technically and fundamentally very sound. Auburn, though, is pretty tough to deal with. So Brittnee, before we let you go, what are you working on with football.com and Last Word on Sports, beside, of course, the big Auburn-Kansas State preview?
Yeah, this one comes first. Thursday night game. Love those for sure. But I'm also working on a preview for the FSU-Clemson game for this weekend. College Game Day will be there. Big matchup for the ACC, and they could use a big matchup after some very public, embarrassing losses last weekend with Louisville and Virginia Tech. And then also taking a look at the Alabama matchup with Florida, which I think is going to be very interesting. Alabama has struggled a little bit so far this season, more than we thought they would. And Florida, I'm not really sure what to think after last weekend's game against Kentucky. So hopefully we'll know a little bit more after this weekend's matchup.
Definitely. Well, Taylor, the good thing for us is that we get to bring you back to not only accommodate the writing, but also bring us a preview here as well. So we appreciate the insight, the information, and you take care, and we'll talk to you later.
Absolutely. See you soon.